So we don't do intros anymore, right, Peter?
I don't know. It's up to
Just
you.
roll right. We just roll right into them.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited to have you here, Steven. You're not Steven, you're Steve, right?
Yeah. Either way, my mom calls me Steven. Weston calls me Steven. Everyone else calls me Steven.
Yeah, I got to call you Steven because Weston and Mom, those are the two. Weston's one of your biggest mentors, former CEO of Dental Intel, kind of hashtag big deal. You're going to be Steven from now on. So really good to have you here on the podcast. We're obviously big fans of dental intelligence, but now that the company has become more robust by acquiring Modentum and Local Med, right? Local Med. It's a real force to be reckoned with because everybody I've ever talked to about Modento absolutely loves it. So tell me what's exciting in the world of software, dental software. What's the most urgent thing that you have to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, cool. I think I'll start here kind of to set the stage. So when you look at the industry, there are a handful of us companies that are coming at the same problem in dentistry. And the problem that I want to highlight is that software is very fragmented, meaning practices have to log into a bunch of different software programs to run their business. You've got an engagement tool that does text messaging and appointment reminders. You have a different online scheduling tool. You have your practice management software. You've got a bunch of different stuff, right? And this has been, Weston and the new leadership's vision for a long time is, hey, can we help to consolidate some of that market? So the same thing you guys are seeing with, DSOs trying to consolidate some practices. In some ways, we're trying to do with software.
With all the plugins we have, they all have to talk to each other. It's such a pain in the ass.
Yes, right. There are cost efficiencies, right? Ideally, with some consolidation, we can offer software programs for, less money. Then there are also like practical, more efficient things when it comes to like operations, like they talk to each other, they work well together. One of those examples being, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, sorry. I thought you were done, but yes, it's one of those things. I'm so glad you're bringing this up because as I kind of look at software in my practice, you're right. It was a lot of like duct tape things, meaning I had this service that allows us to text and this service that allows us to kind of
for review generation.
And it was just, you're right. It was so it was clunky. It was hyper fragmented. And it,
it's unstable.
I love when business
too.
owners look at something and they say, this is the problem I'm going to solve, right?
Yeah.
You can almost spin that in reverse when someone brings something to you. What problem is this solving? And so you guys took that and said, like, the problem is it's clunky. And to your point about inefficiencies with money, the most important inefficiency that it's solving is of time, because at the front office, at the admin, the front office, the business team, their time is the most precious because people are calling and trying to pull it away. So the more efficient you make that, the more efficient it makes the practice. So I love this. I love what you guys have solved.
Yeah. Now, in the big picture, I don't know if the audience knows, but software is not as easy to make as you would think. Like 4 years ago, I heard Weston talk about this. And now 4 years later, I'm like, I want to be moving so much faster, right? There's some things where I just can see it, but it just hasn't been created yet. So what we've done then, where we started as a company, Dental Intel, we think we started in the right place. We started with data and analytics. And so that's what we're known for, like automating reporting, getting insight into the practice, kind of like the speedometer of the practice or your dashboard of the practice, right? Like what's going on? Where are we doing well? Where do we need to improve? And then the problem with providing data, though, just data, is that unless you take action on the data, it's honestly pointless, right? Like why you can look at numbers so you're blue in the face, but unless you like take some meaningful movement because of it, then why even look at it? And so we noticed that some practices were doing that, right? They were getting dental intel, they're looking at data, and then they weren't changing anything. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to actually take action on the data. Simple example, right, is we have a solution called Patient Finder. You can go in and say, hey, I want to see all my patients who have unscheduled treatment. Let's say you just want to look for the ones you've diagnosed with Crown, who have insurance remaining of $1,000 or more, and have said yes to some treatment in the past, right? So like that's like a pretty like great group of people to talk to and try to get them scheduled. Practices in the past had to like piecemeal how they were going to contact them, right? So they had to like export that list, upload it into like Revenue Well or Solution Reach or whatever they were using, right? And then start engaging them there. And we realized, hey, those should all work together. You should be able to find those people, save the list, immediately begin push a button and start like communicating with them, whether it's text message, email, send them a scheduling link. And so now at this point as a company, we're to that point, right? So we acquired Locomed, which does the online scheduling. We acquired Modento, which does all of the two-way text message communication.
When were those dates? What were the dates of those two acquisitions?
Yeah, good. So
Roughly. Just curious.
Local Med was the summer of 2019 is when we acquired them.
Yep.
So we were like 8-9 months into the acquisition before COVID hit. And right when COVID hit is when we fast tracked getting bulk messaging sent out through Patient Finder so that people could get hygiene patients scheduled back in when like the schedules fell apart. And then we acquired Modento in late January, early February of 2021. So we're just about a year and a half into that acquisition.
So now all these softwares are bundled, or you still a la carte them to the dental profession?
So you can still a la carte them, right? So you can still buy all three separately. But if you go to our website, we just did a rebrand. So you'll see that everything is now under the Dental Intelligence brand. We have our analytics piece and we have our engagement piece. And we've taken all the pieces of all these solutions and bundled them into those two.
Got it.
The idea being on one side of things, you want to have a view where you can kind of get a pulse on the practice. And then the other view that you want to see is how do we actually engage these people? Oh, cool. Peter, you're going to pull that up and so you can share that. Cool. So the audience can see. Yes. If you just hover over products.
Yeah. So
then you'll see that we've got them. Yeah. Lumped into those two now.
And kiosk is what is that? A check-in portal?
Yeah. Check-in, right? So check-in, patients can check in there at the practice. You can do, without
and that updates into like the major practice management softwares.
Yep, it does.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and there's
Click
also
on that kiosk for me. I want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's connect after. We also have a solution in there called Live Ops, where you can digitally manage the location.
Oh, that's from Modento, right? Modento had that software.
This is from Modento. Yep.
Got it.
What is it? Live ops?
So you can actually see where your patients are and what ops live. So let's say a patient moves in the middle of treatment or something like live or arrived. If you swap them around, you can see exactly where everybody is.
Yep.
It's very cool.
That's awesome. So
do you guys ever see yourself getting into the PMS space at all?
Jeez, I wish.
So I was actually going to bring that up. So coming back to this whole, consolidation of software platforms. On one end, and this is not the end we are currently on one end, you'll see there are some small upcoming practice management solutions that are cloud-based that are trying to consolidate everything all in one right out of the gates, right? So that the big players, you see Fuse and Ascend that are kind of trying to do the same thing with products they're either partnered with or they acquired on like the Shine side of things. And then you see like, Curve, Oryx, is a new one that I've been seeing pop up lately. Denticon, right? They're trying to bring everything all in one.
Yes.
But they're starting with practice management software and they're kind of boxing out these third-party integrations. Where we're starting from a third-party integration standpoint, which I think in the long run is the best place to be. And I'll explain why, right? So we believe that by being a third-party integration company, we can be far more nimble with our innovation than if we're trying to do literally everything, including practice management software, right? So think about Eaglesoft, Dentrix, Open Dental. They kind of started, at least Henry Schein did, they started trying to like come at this whole, like, we're going to do everything. But their products that do everything have lagged, right? Like their patient communication isn't nearly as good as everyone else's. When you stay kind of smaller as that third-party integrator, like I said, you can just observe the market quicker. You can make quicker movement towards innovation and then disrupt some of the, the big incumbents. So we'll see if that plays out in the long run. We're feeling pretty good now, in terms of company growth, it's all working really well. But there are some people that are trying to come at it from, hey, we're going to do the practice management software and everything. And growth numbers on those solutions have been pretty slower than expected. But you never know, Peter, right? We'll see like, hey, the tides could change. And if they begin to change, then maybe we jump into that space. But as of right now, we don't have intention.
I mean, it looks from like your product offering. That's the only thing that you're not offering in the ecosystem.
Right.
Yeah, we just starting, and right?
Frankly, it's the harder parts. All these, really advanced practice management software is just how much innovation do you really need if you have all these tertiary products on them?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Like, what do you really need? You need a chart and an accounting software. And if you could hook it into your
place to put in notes.
Right, exactly. But if you have your patient financing, imagine like coming out of the treatment planner, clicking on that button, or coming out of the treatment planner and sending the reminders. I mean, it just seems like such a no-brainer. What are we missing? Right. Why is PMS software that tricky or compliant? What's the deal with it?
Yeah, and then there's other elements too with data storage and then A big one is integration with your imaging software, right? That one's far more complicated than I think most people would imagine.
Yeah, that's true.
But some of those newer practice management solutions do have some like pain points and struggles there where like you can't use the imaging solution you were using before, right? And so, so some of that stuff becomes pretty.
Is Open Dental still like the leader, Peter or Stephen, as you know it, to be in the cloud-based practice management software sector? Because that's what I used to hear. Are they still the number one player? Curve.
And I would put them, and Open Dental, just to qualify, they are on the on-premise server-based solutions. So they do have a cloud one they're working on. So they've been like the leader in terms of like practice growth, percentage of practice growth on the on-prem stuff for sure for the last handful of years. And right now, man, it's difficult to know who the leader is with cloud-based. They're all very hesitant to share numbers. And as you guys know, most everyone's public numbers are all bloated, right? So they'll say, hey, we've got like 3,000 locations or 5,000 locations. And maybe more realistically, it's more like, I don't know, smaller than that.
Got it.
They're going to do everything they can to forward those numbers round up.
So Steve, you guys obviously being, the genesis of the company was an analytics company, like you said, and we've actually used some of those in our field manuals we do for a summit. I know you guys put out a big PDF report. So data is still your jam. And I think a lot of people are interested on, what that data tells us. I love how you said data is nothing unless the rubber can meet the road, right? Where do you execute on that? And I think so many times we get enthralled by, look at this chart and look at this graph and look at this data. And you get wooed by the data, but until you know like what lever to pull, it doesn't do anything. And sometimes that analysis causes paralysis. So can you kind of find something? I know in the past we've done like, for instance, when we had Weston on in the past, we talked about like the biggest metric to kind of move your practice, thing that you're going to look at, if nothing else, is look at your reappointment rates, right? So given that you kind of live and breathe in data, is there something now that, and as you get more data, you get more intelligent with the process, right? I mean, meaning the more data you get, the more you can confidently say, Stephen, that here's what we think happens. We've seen it over and over again in these practices. So do you have any like groundbreaking stuff to tell our industry or those people listening that like, here's the things that you should be doing?
Yeah, let's start. I mean, the same stuff we've talked about in the past all stands. Like
I
the
figured.
number one metric that's correlated with practice success is hygiene reappointment. Like that just is what it is.
It hasn't changed.
To what degree? Just out of curiosity, like is there not even a close second?
And the close second would be your case acceptance as a doctor.
Okay. All right.
Or provider, I should say, because it could be the hygienist as well. Okay. But the hygiene one, once again, is just because of patient retention. But this is worth all like share some interesting insight, I think, that's worth like noting on some shifts in the marketplace that we're seeing. Okay. So there was a Wall Street Journal article that was posted this last week that suggested that spending in dental was down 11.3%.
Interesting.
That's
over what period of time?
Number. Say what?
Yeah, over what period of time?
Year over year, starting in 2020. So in comparison, right now, in comparison to 2020, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, they're suggesting that spending is down. Now, here's what's fascinating. Is that I'm not necessarily seeing in just the general performance of our practices that they're down by 11%. Like that's not happening with performance. So then it begs the question, like where is that coming from? Right.
Well, so it could have been the shutdown too. So it's the statistical average of being shut down for, between 2 and 7 months, depending on where you are.
Yeah. So here's something that is fascinating. So we've been tracking, as you guys know, but I'll share with the audience, we segment our customer base and the ones we're speaking with. So we're speaking with about 10,000 practices right now. We have about 8,600 like active customers, and we've got just over 1,000 or so of these like lingering syncs that we're doing, where people have been like, just sync with me, but I'm not buying anything. So about 10,000 is our pool. We segment that into the top 10% of practices, our average practices, and our bottom 10%. Like those are the groups that we're looking at. When the pandemic hit, after we went through that first, it was really more like 9 months. So like from March 15th through the end, at the end of that year, at the end of 2020, we analyzed what performance looked like. And what was interesting was that the top 10% of practices actually outperformed their previous year. So in 2020, the top 10% in general did better than they did in 2019. So they were able to see growth even with that little shutdown that happened in March and April.
Jeez.
Some of that though, including PPP money, you think?
No, because this would have just been from production numbers we're seeing inside of practice management software, right?
Wow,
so,
that's big.
So we're not looking at like EBITDA or like their like actual revenue numbers, right?
We're looking at actually tied to the treatment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's
so whatever's
crazy.
going into the practice management software.
Did you boil it down by state too, by the way? Did you have state information in there?
I didn't break it down in a state. I could go track some of that
That'd be
down,
so cool to see how like the what states, because it really shows you like, hey, you're not just practicing in your region, your state matters. I mean, let's face the facts. If you were in Florida, or Georgia, you were mandated to shut down 8 weeks. Yes. California and New York could have been 20 weeks. I don't even know. I mean, what was the shutdowns in New York? That matters.
There's lots of a long time, right? So I'm sure that matters, right? But what's interesting though is that on the bottom 10%, they did worse than they had ever done in their entire history. Right? So not even just like 2019, but it was like the worst year. And we in general are keeping about 5 years of data, depending on how long they've got it in their practice management software. And it was like the worst year that they had seen. So there became this like chasm in performance between like the best practices and the worst practices in the nation. And so you saw
the top, let me make sure I'm understanding this. The top 10% that you had in your data set did better. The bottom
2020 than 2019
of your data set, the bottom 10 did worse
than they've ever done.
Yes. Okay.
That's correct.
Interesting.
Right.
Isn't that wild?
So what's interesting then is
psychology.
So we started, and I actually agree with that, right? Like people's mentality coming into a situation like that, I'm sure had a big impact on how they responded to that, how they actually performed. So it wasn't impossible to do well still through that period. So the reason why I was bringing this up, Peter brought up hygiene reappointment, like a number one metric for success. So here's one thing that's interesting. So we were like, okay, so what were some of these metrics that really defined the solid practices from the ones that struggled worse than they ever had, right? So one of those was patient-based growth or the lack thereof, right? Or attrition, right? Them losing patients. So in 2019, top 10% of practices were increasing their patient base by about 14%, okay? What's interesting is that in 2020 and in 2021, we saw about the exact same number. Patient base grew by 18% in the top 10% of practices. So they're seeing increased growth over the last 2 years in comparison to what we were seeing in the past, right? So they're growing more. So they're picking up patients from somewhere. And I can guess where they're probably picking up the patients from based off of what we're seeing on the bottom end, okay? So on the bottom end, in 2019, the worst practices shrunk by about 7%. But in 2020 and this last year, they shrunk by 12%, right?
Wow.
So you take, it seems on the surface at least, that all the patients that these bottom practices are losing are migrating over to these top practices, right? The numbers like almost identical on the bottom, the increase in loss on the bottom and the increase in growth on the top is almost identical.
This is like Pareto's principle, because I'm sure you're about to say that the 80% really kind of did as you had expected, right? So there's the 10% on the top, 10% at the bottom, which is an 80, 10%, right. 10% equals 20. Pareto's principle is 80-20. There's massive change in that. I'm guessing, am I right to extrapolate the fact that 80% did just as you had kind of expected?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So here's where that becomes interesting. So I'll just like hone in on this whole like patient retention thing, right? Like that becomes such a key moment in the practice. Mm-hmm. Craig, I agree with, some of what you said about mindset. Like I'm a big believer that our energy, we can change it, but the energy you put out comes back to you, right? So if we have a practice that's like all concerned, the world's going to crap, they're not sure what they're going to do with their business, like patients are naturally going to sense that you're not going to behave as well, like 100%. Your team's going to have, I'm a big fan. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but one of my mentors taught me this, where like there are people that live this world, like they hold on to money or opportunity with like a closed fist, like they hold on to it so tight that they're very restricted. Where in reality, if you start to live your life and live as if like there's open hands, like there's so much opportunity,
like a flow of it, energy, kind of open using money like energy. Yeah.
Then that naturally kind of like comes around to you.
Well, it's not even as abstract as the examples you're giving. I mean, I talked to fearful dentists, and when the pandemic was happening, like there were offices even that my friends were working in I have a friend who's a hygienist. She was working at a place that was banning the use of ultrasonic instruments as recently as like 4 months ago. So imagine like you're physically taking away the tools. I mean, it's not even abstract how you believe and your feelings about money. Like you physically shut down the tools that operate your business. So it was a very interesting polarization of mindset we get to actually see. And there's never been a time in history we can actually see by visual example someone's mindset around COVID. Some people stopped wearing the mask after a year. Some people stopped after 16 months. Some people haven't stopped yet. And so there's never been a physical manifestation of your concern for the virus as there was now. Now we can see people literally, you might remark you're driving to work one day and you're seeing somebody walking completely alone on a sidewalk with no one around them within 600 feet, and they're wearing a mask, which, is a personal choice, but it's a physical representation of that person's thought process. Because most of us would know that we'd be more inclined to wear a mask in crowded places and less when we're alone, or maybe. So it was a polarization of the mindsets too. It's like literally that was such a gut punch for people. I
feel like you have even more stuff to tell on your sheet in front of you there. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So that one was a huge takeaway, right? Like I mentioned the chasm. One of those big ones that caused that was ability to retain patients, right? Like, are your patients consistently staying with you? And then calling back to the beginning, some of those leading indicators for that are every single day, are we reappointing patients back into hygiene? And then the big picture one as well, there was a significant number change here worth noting was what we call pre-appointment. So essentially of all of your active patients, how many of those are pre-appointed? And I think it's worth calling out that all of these had big change, but in the top 10%, actually, let me pull up the number so it's right here in front of me. So on pre-appointment percentage, specifically, I'm just noting with hygiene, so all of our active hygiene patients. What's interesting here is everyone took a hit this last year, which kind of makes sense in the sense that when everything got shut down, we had a crap ton of patients that all fell off the schedule. And the only way to get them back is from just like brute force labor, right? Like calling them, texting them, emailing them, and creating a new appointment on the schedule. So that was painful. So the top 10% dropped from an average of 77% of their patients appointed to come back down to 70%. But then the bottom 10% went from about 44% down to 30%. So a huge
bigger drop.
A much bigger drop.
The best got they took a 7% hit. The bottom took a 12% hit, right?
What is ideal for you, Stephen?
Do you see a corresponding, sorry, Peter, to cut you. Do you see a corresponding drop in that same percentage of revenue?
Yes.
Is it exact? Is it exactly statistically? So it would be.
And then here, just so that everyone understands some like.
Sorry, Stephen, is that you see that corresponding percentage of revenue 7 points down on your reappointment rate? Is it 7% in loss in top line revenue?
Yep.
12% down.
Yep. Both pre-appointment and reappointment have direct correlation with practice revenue. Right.
Can you believe that? So if you've got nothing left no more brain power or no more execution power left in your practice, the only thing you should work on is your reappointment rate. That's it. Yeah. And then the problem
what do you think
was an excellent,
what do you think is an excellent reappointment rate? Let's say, because we got gunners that listen to this pod. Like, so where would you say if you were a practice owner, Stephen, and you're like, look, at this number, I'm good. Because it's not going to be 100%, right? So
have them pull up yours and mine right now.
Well,
91%. Do you want me to?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, pull it up. Be a big gut punch. We can always edit it out, Peter.
No,
Craig, you're at 42%.
We will only edit it if I'm secondary to you. We will definitely keep it when I'm superior.
Or you could just edit what he says to like just edit the whole video that you're on top.
Yeah, you just change the words.
Yeah, that's exactly. Peter well.
So I'll pull this whole last year. It'll take me a second. But yeah, in general, 91%, 92% is where you hit that top 10% on reappointment. And then for pre-appointment, you're around 75% of your patients pre-appointed to get to that top 10%. Average is around 50%. 52% is the number.
52% is average.
Which that number is crazy, right? Like the average practice only has half their patients scheduled to come back. Like that's wild to me that you're able to like operate that way. I mean, that means
Well,
you're
you
just
might have a
turning over
great
patients.
marketing. You might have a great marketing budget that you just backfilling that in with all
Yeah,
new
but
patients.
dentistry as a whole is no different, is very similar to software. Like a lot of our revenues are focused on recurring revenue.
That's right.
Recurring patients,
Mhm.
people coming back. And so you're right. When you're letting half of those people go and be like, I don't know, see if you like us next month or not. Like no software company would exist if that was the case.
No,
right?
Right.
no.
But that's
So
why plastic
dentistry
surgeons
is crazy.
Right, but that's why plastic surgeons too, Peter, they use Botox. They do Botox and all these other adjunctive procedures because, frankly speaking, they're not great money makers, but they
Right.
don't have the ability to
The lead
see
gen.
Mrs. Jones, every 6 months. So they keep talking about the Botox, and eventually the blepharoplasty or the facelift or whatever else. That's what they have to do. We're just blessed that we have an industry that allows for recurring revenue.
That's fascinating.
Also, another metric. I mean, obviously, Craig, I feel like we beat this in over the years, even talking to Wes, and we talk about our summits all the time. And that's the even in our masterminds, we talk about this metric just because of the data, Stephen, that you've even now fortified. Another thing, and I know you're looking at those numbers. Another thing that I get actually on the daily is I call it APPV number, right? The average production per patient visit on average. And you, I think, alluded to that as being the second place one, but that might be, maybe you didn't. You said the doctor's enrolling treatment, but I think that is correlated because obviously the
that's the
higher
leading
that is,
indicator into that number,
yes,
right?
okay, yeah. So I'd like when you get our data up and acknowledge me as the winner, that then we can move on to the APP.
So what's the next statistic? Because Peter asked that. It's hygiene reappointment and then patient acceptance or doctor acceptance or case acceptance. Peter asked the question. I'm curious to know the answer. Is it a close second, or is it way above and beyond the best single performing data point? Is that reappointment?
We're looking for the easy button, Stephen.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
It's by far is reappointment retention is your biggest one.
Like plug the hole in your back door. Don't do anything else but plug the hole.
If you keep patients, then you're going to do well as a practice owner.
Yeah,
that's great.
I mean, and then beyond that, then you start tinkering with things to improve your production per visit, right? But that spread we're talking about, on an annual basis, we're talking about several $100s per patient. So you can change that number, but that spread's it's not like the annual patient value between the bottom 10%, the top 10% is like $3,000 of a difference, right? Like it's only hundreds of dollars of difference between bottom and top, where the biggest differentiator between practices is their ability to retain patients. And, the worst ones are just like cycling through them, and they're spending a crap ton of money on marketing. New patients are less likely to say yes to treatment. They're less likely to be.
And we all love the new patient. Everybody loves it. Oh, I got 4 new patients today. No one cares about the existing patient.
I don't know why.
Yeah, it's
statistically
twice, 3 times as much work, 10 times as much work sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is crazy. That is the sexy in our industry, but it's like, forget about the gold bars that are sitting in my practice. I'd like to get the ones out in public potentially.
Yeah, there's new dust covered.
I'm going to spend the gold bars I have to try and attract those gold bars.
And here's something that's interesting to me. I've traveled quite a bit now in the last 4 years, and I have had a number of doctors bring up to me that they're like, well, but Steve, if I just have the same patients, then I'm going to have, what did they call it? Like clean mouth syndrome or something?
No treatment.
I'm going to do all the work.
No treatment.
I will have fixed everything. And in my opinion, I'm like, do you really believe that highly of yourself, that your patients are all going to brush their teeth? They're never going to get another cavity.
No accidents going to happen. Nothing's going to change. No wear.
That's just unrealistic, right? I have never seen a practice that has accomplished wow, our patients are so compliant that they never keep having issues in their mouth. Those things just keep arising. Patients get older, which brings this new set of opportunity within the mouth. So that one I've been surprised by. Is that something that doctors talk about?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah,
I've heard someone say that to me.
Well,
I would buy that practice, but they did all the work already.
Yeah, I was going to say it's commonly talked about in an acquisition, Steve, where it's the phrase is, well, there's really no work to be done, right? Because that doctor may have been a unicorn at producing the dentistry and enrolling it, right? And so when you have a unicorn doctor who can do cosmetics and implants and stuff like that, it's they've probably had that conversation, and quote unquote, there's not much dentistry to be done. Is the issue. But I see where you're coming from as well, from the like, I don't think that being the case when you have 3,000 actives and something's bound to happen.
And that might be maybe like, I can see on the cosmetic side, right? Because in general, like you're not going to go like redo all the crowns,
right,
you know, often, hopefully ever, as long as they're your patient, you know, maybe 15, 20 years down the road. I could see that, but like, I don't know. My guess is that you haven't done full mouth restorations on all 3,000 of your active patients, right? Like
there's holes in certain business models too, Stephen. And it's like, there's certain practices that exist as like just purely cosmetic, like you said, or all on 4 type practices. And they don't really have hygiene programs. They might be doing 5, 6, 7 million in top line revenue, but have one hygienist. So it's not, the practice is built differently. It's not built to have recurring revenue.
So Craig, I was trying to, coming back to your guys' numbers, I was trying to pull all of last year, and it like took me a second where I'm like, why is this taking a little while to load? And I forgot that Craig's practice is probably one of the largest practices in the US in terms of like data.
Okay, can I take that as a win then? Is that Peter's?
No.
But my reappointment rate's at 31%.
I'm assuming listeners know that Craig runs like a monster dental.
Oh practice. Yeah. He'll tell everybody on every podcast.
What are you talking about? I'm not the one who wants first place here. I don't want to win this.
Craig, if you were to break out your practice into like an average multi-location group, what do you consider yourself? 10, 13? How many locations do you call yourself if you were to do it that
I don't know. Yeah, 10 or 12.
10 or so.
I don't know if you take, maybe, I don't know, 8. I have no idea. Peter could probably answer that better.
So I have no idea. Let's see. And I'm gonna switch just so we're like apples to apples. We're just gonna look at last month for both of you. Just in
not last month. We can't do last month. We have to do like
do any month.
No, I'm just doing the most recent.
Peter,
month,
how are you flexing
like, current,
on me like that?
Current performance. Okay, we can't look too deep in the past, Uncle Rico. So Craig, you were at 88% last month on hygiene reappointments. So you're just like flirting with top 10%, and then Atlanta Dental Spa, you guys were at 82%. And I'm just looking at Atlanta Dental Spa, just the one location.
Oh, wow.
Oh, just one location?
No, but no. There's no qualifies. You have to edit the shit out of this podcast right now.
No,
let's break for a second.
It's only one location though. You can't
pull up another one.
Pull up
another one. Let's do another one.
Do you want me to look at another one?
Yes, let's do another one. Let's go full attack mode.
Remind me, Peter, one of the other locations you got.
Which one did you look up?
I looked up Atlanta Dental Spa. Is what I was looking at.
Yeah, so all the conglomerate locations.
Is that everyone? I guess it's run under one account because it is one database. So that was just the last month. Okay.
That's right. And just hygiene.
Okay.
Then I will concede.
Still above average. Okay.
Yeah, I concede then. All right. I was wrong. I was off.
Now close. You're only 6 points behind me. Around there.
That means I'm a first place loser, right?
Hey, now I'm not in the top percent. I'm at 88%. You need to be 91 to be top 10%.
All right,
which
so
there's going to be heads rolling after this pod. I got to go, guys. Can we end right now? I'm just going to go scream at everybody. What are you doing?
I know, because I've looked at both of your practices in the past. I know both of you have been in that top 10%. So remember, listeners, just looking at last month, it was June. So maybe, people.
Oh, you know what? Listen, I'm not going to say, I got to say something in my defense. Yes. Our patients are seasonal. So at this time, when they leave, they can't make their points because they don't know when they're coming back. We have like 20, probably 35% of our practice that's completely does not live here during the summer. So all the May, June. Yeah. If you pull up like our November one, we're going to be at like 99.975%.
I 99. Peter, same with you, right? Seasonal in
Atlanta? No. I have no excuse. I'm going to take my L and move on down the road.
Cool. Well, that one, I'll just call this out again. I think the reason why that one's so important, by the way, that reappointment is because it snowballs over time, right? Like if we started with 1,000 patients in this 6-month segment, because we're seeing all our hygiene in that 6-month segment, if it's call it 1,000 to make it simple, if we only reappoint 80% of them, that means 200 of those patients need to get called, text to get rescheduled back. And any of them we don't get in recare. Typically recare is about, you get between like 20 to 30% of whoever you didn't schedule to come back to like get rescheduled. So like that just snowballs over time, or it gets worse and worse and you end up losing the patients. So big number.
That's crazy.
Let's come back to the report and let me highlight another one that I think was interesting in like what differentiated these practices, and maybe, why could the Wall Street Journal say, hey, spending in dentistry is down 11%, but like a Craig Spodak, a Peter Boulden, like you guys are like, I'm not feeling that. Like we're not down 11% year over year in our numbers, right? Here's one that's interesting. Top 10% and bottom 10% have always been differentiated. Another one is by their same day treatment acceptance percentage, meaning they're getting work done today that they diagnosed, right? So they're not like scheduling and waiting for the future. Both the bottom 10% and the top 10%, when COVID hit, started doing more same day treatment. Okay. So before the pandemic hit everything, top 10% were doing about 41% of their production was happening same day. They weren't waiting for the future. You see increased case acceptance because of that, a lot of things. They jumped to 48% same day treatment acceptance. Bottom 10% was only doing 5% before COVID hit.
Wow.
Right? So a huge gap there in performance, 41% down to 5%. So that was already a differentiator. But what's interesting though, is that the bottom 10%, I think out of like necessity, jumped up to 15%. So still not like high enough to make like a big enough difference in their production, but they were like, crap, like we need to get some work done. So they jumped up to about 15% of their work they were completing same day. So I'm interested to see like if that stays consistent or if that starts to slide back down for those practices. So far, they've been staying pretty much the same all through 2021 at least. And then we produce numbers at the end of every year. So we'll see if that holds through 2022. But that's another one that's interesting, is where same day treatment went up for top 10%, has kind of stayed there. And with the bottom 10% of practices, they haven't like jumped enough for really for that to make a difference.
Are you guys working on anything like workplace satisfaction, or do you have an ability to import as another variable, like reviews into these algorithms? So you could see like top performing reviews,
like an NPS score?
Yeah, because I think it's fast.
Yeah,
what I'm imagining is these low performing doctors. It's like we always say, it's psychology and skill set, and 80% of psychology. It's got to be your mentality. So it's like, well, I don't think we should do it, today, or it's just that we're all our own worst enemies. And I just wonder if you can put into these variables as well, the NPS, net promoter score, of how your team feels about you, how the community feels about you. Because I bet you these people are not doing well on those either. So not only are you not successful financially, but I bet you're running successful businesses. That would be my expectation. Do you have anything way to put that into the variable there? I feel like you have like the dental matrix at your fingertips there. I'd love to see it's all like zeros and ones. You're like Neo of dentistry.
That's one of the things that, going to the beginning, talking about consolidation. That's one of the places where we have been partnering on. So like inside Modento, we're partnered with Swell, which handles a lot of the reviews management and stuff like that. But no, we haven't like paired the reviews data along with practice management. But
you should. That'd be so powerful for the industry.
One of the things that we are working on, where maybe we might be able to do this as like the next step to this. We've never really been able to give the industry like live data, like what's going on now. We've used some of that internally. Like we always want to understand, for example, like that number, Wall Street Journal says, hey, it's down 11%. That could mean a lot for us as a software company, right? Like that could mean, cancellations. That could be, buyers maybe aren't going to be interested in buying if there's not as much money there for software. They might scale back. And so we need to be on top of that stuff. And so luckily we're able to look and see, okay, like what's actually happening with our practices and production. And we're feeling pretty confident moving into this, potential recessionary era that we're in now, this bear market.
How many practices exist? Like,
wait, sorry,
you guys
Peter,
know
if you don't mind, let him just finish this. I wanted to hear, because you feel really confident going into this recessionary era with what? I want you to just complete that. Because
with our software business, meaning
you obviously are bullish on the dental industry, because if the dental industry took not only 11%, but then a 20 and 30% hit, your software sales would suffer as well.
Yes, it would.
So how are you feeling? What is leading to your level of confidence going into what everybody thinks is going to be a bear market?
So some of the things that we've done, I mean, this is more just like business stuff. I don't know if
it's relevant for us,
but
it's relevant for us because it paints the picture of dentistry.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that has had to do with, the way that we've positioned ourselves. So the fact that we have consolidated solutions, we've got some cost efficiencies that have been helpful. Like in the past, if someone were going to buy the analytics solution, for example, it's $450 a month. Before, that was a net new spend on top of everything else they had. Where now, if someone's, using Modento and online scheduling, those things are $300. And then all of a sudden now, just to add analytics is only a couple $100 more on top of that, right? So there's like the pricing of how we fit within a dental practice is a little more interesting now from a pricing perspective. That's been really helpful. And then we've been investing, millions of dollars into our DSO enterprise product. And we've got some really cool stuff coming out here over the next couple of quarters that we think will position us uniquely as well. So one of the things that I will share, do you guys follow, Brian Kaleo over at Dykema much? He's been sharing some interesting data around kind of this accelerated growth of practice consolidation. So just a couple of years ago, people were saying, practice consolidation was around like 18, 19, 20%, just back in like 2019.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the spring of this year, though, Brian got up and shared that we were between 32 and 34% now. So about a third of dental practices have been consolidated into a small, emerging, or large DSO. That's fast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And probably has something to do with the fact that I mentioned earlier of these low performing practices, docs who are like, man, I this isn't working for me. I'm not making enough.
COVID accelerated that for sure.
Operating. So I'm sure there was some acceleration there of performance. Like, hey, I can't handle this anymore. So they sell off to these DSOs. And then, potentially some earlier retirees seeing higher multiples. There's a category there, people with like 5 to 10 years where we're seeing some increase in some sales as well, where they're like, hey, I'm just going to sell, take advantage of what I think is a potentially high multiple on my individual practice, and then maybe reap some rewards as some of these private equity groups go to sell in the next 5 to 10, right? So I think there's some interesting stuff happening there. So we positioned ourselves really well for that space as that continues to grow. And we're seeing some really good, sales engagement and software engagement with groups. So those are the reasons why we feel confident moving into, this kind of recessionary period, knowing that if practices are hit, it's going to start with this lower group. They're going to get consolidated into DSOs. We're a good fit there. So kind of on either end, top performing practices will continue to use us because performance is going to stay steady or grow. And then with the DSO consolidation, we're positioned well. So.
Got it. I'd love to know, Peter, you have a question that's outstanding that I interrupted. And I don't want that to be forgotten.
It was kind of addressed, honestly. I was asking, like, what's the total addressable market for dental intel right now? If there's been consolidation, right? The more the industry consolidated, there's less mom and pop practices that will use the practice on a standalone. So, so I was just asking, like, okay, so you guys have 8,000 users, essentially practices. I wonder how many practices there are in the US. You find, and I know you would know that number way better than us.
I've got some numbers if you want me to just spur them off the top of my head. So Bureau of Labor Statistics, they suggest that there are about 100,000 dental practices.
Okay.
But somewhere to the tune of like 160 to 180,000 dentists, right? Because you've got multiple dentists in every practice on average. So that's where Bureau of Labor Statistics is. You find some other stuff, ADA, Marco over there is publishing some things suggesting that might be a little higher, maybe between 120 to 140,000 physical dental practices. But if we just go with Bureau of Labor Statistics, 100,000 practices, that's not like, it's a big number, but it's also not that big of a number, So if we're at 8,000, creeping up on, it's like 86 something, creeping up on that 10,000, we're already about 10%
of the market, addressable market. Yeah.
And then of that, how much is DSO, how much is not. So there's some interesting, we'll see how that plays out on the practice management side of software side of things. You've got Dentrix, I think, who claims on their website like 50,000. EagleSoft is claiming, I think, like 36,000, and then Open Dental is claiming like 14,000 on their website. So you start to add all those up, and that gets you pretty close. Between 70 to 80% of that market, they're claiming that they own from a practice management side of things, which we integrate with. So.
Have you guys seen a slowdown yet, Stephen? That would corroborate that Wall Street Journal statistic? Because frankly speaking, you guys have a data set that I think is super. I mean, what is the ADA's data set? It's reported.
Yeah.
Hey, Dennis, how you doing? I'm doing really well. I think I'm making $1 million. No, you're not.
Yeah, ADA, it's all polling. Yeah,
it's all polling. And if you ask dentists how they're doing, Peter, you and I know this. How are you? Oh, phenomenal. Yeah. My reappointment rate's 99%. So you have what I believe the ultimate data set. So can you corroborate what the Wall Street Journal is saying? And if so, If not, then where did they get their data from?
Yeah.
Doc, how's it feeling?
Yeah. So
Feels
far,
pretty good.
no, we can't corroborate. We're not seeing a drop.
So then
in
it's not, then wouldn't you say, Peter, with their
100%.
scope?
I like where you're tracking, right? The way that, like, for instance, we'll zoom out in a second and talk about it from a recession in the economy, right? The best data set would be the one from American Express and consumer spending and things like that, like to be the big canary in the coal mine for, like, are we about to hit something bad? So the extrapolation, the analog of dentistry would be what you're
Dental
talking about
intel.
with Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Now,
have the intel. So how would the Wall Street Journal calling up random dentists? You feel like it's slower? Yeah, it definitely feels slower.
We are polling to see how you're feeling right now.
Well, that's what the ADA is doing. How did you do last year? No one, every dentist I've ever asked their numbers, how did you do last year? It's always wrong.
Yeah. Yes. Now, one thing that's worth noting, an internal discussion we've had over the last week is, there is potential that our data set, you think about the type of practice owner that is going to be attracted to using, our core product analytics is not going to be, in general, your average dentist, right? So when you
then again, the person listening to this podcast, Steven, these are the people that are like actively trying to get better. You either consume content, you buy additional software, you reinvest in your business. That's what this is. Whether you're just driving your car, listening, you're investing in your business. Whether you're, so
there's potential that maybe, like I mentioned before, it seems to be this pattern of we're seeing this chasm happen between top practices and bottom practices. Maybe the ones that are attracted to using our software, we're more heavily weighted on the higher end that are interested in what we're using. And this is actually something we're working on right now. So we've never mapped out, if we're like a bell curve of our customers, are we heavily weighted on the higher end, or do we have like a pretty standard bell curve where, the average practice is all, do you understand what I'm saying? Statistics curves. Our expectation is when we finish this analysis, and if you guys want, I'll share with you, are our customers weighted on the higher end of practices?
Well, what a great sales pitch for you guys. So the average dental intelligence consumer does this well. So I mean, frankly speaking, Peter, we were friendly when you got dental intelligence. I referred Peter into it. And the minute he saw his numbers, he got really obsessive. He saw some of my numbers, he saw some of his. And within like 6 months, he was like beating me on everything. Once you got the data, you took action on it. Because it's really hard to put that together. But it would be, I remember that COVID report that you did, that was such like the state of the industry report. Are you doing, part of my ignorance, but are you guys doing that type of reporting on a regular basis?
That's one of the things. I was getting there. So we are currently just finishing up a project. It's called our Data Lakes project. So in the past, and this may be too nerdy, but in the past, I'll keep it simple. In the past, in order for us to get industry data, we had to go query our patient-facing database. So there are risks involved with that. We could technically put a strain on customer experience where if we're constantly tapping into that, then it might take you longer, Craig, to load your data in Dental Intel. So we didn't want to have that happen. So we needed a way to mirror all of our patient, our practice-facing data, but be able to mess with it ourselves. And so we're just about done with that project. And once that's completed, then we'll be able to have live access to all industry data. And then we can start giving guys like you or industry partners access to, hey, here's exactly what's going on. Here are trends. Marco over at the
be an AI company.
Hey, hook me up. I want to see that.
Oh, that'd be so cool to see that.
So
the ADA should consult
coming from us really soon, where we want to understand some of that stuff. What's going on? What's Marco finding from ADA and the Health Policy Institute? What are we seeing? And start to combine some of that and create some live industry feeds, basically. So
yeah, I mean, we're doing the same thing, compiling our mastermind data right now. So we are taking the numbers that people produced over the year prior to mastermind, and the statistical increase of just being in 1 year of mastermind is mind-boggling. We have people that are literally doubling the revenue just being in the mastermind. So, but we're just querying that data right now because it's been the completion of our second mastermind is completing right now. But that's super cool. I think it's super cool. I mean, those who do that work and invest in themselves reap the rewards. It's that simple. I
agree. And then I'll add, we always share, Weston share this, when performance is measured, performance improves. I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's anything in our life, right? I'm a big endurance racer. And so I've been measuring hard. I've been trying to work on my speed for my running. And I've watched as I've gotten faster and faster and faster. I never thought last year, my goal was, hey, I want to run a like sub 6-minute mile. And I hit it right at the end of the year. And then now all of a sudden I'm playing around with the sub 5-minute. Like I watched some Nick Bear videos. I saw that dude run a sub 5-minute mile. And I'm like, I want to go do that. And so now I'm like flirting with it. And I think the same thing plays over in practice management. I've seen it time and time again. When performance is measured, performance improves. So I think a good reminder to the audience.
We're big advocates of that. I mean, we talk about, that's Pearson's law, right?
Yep.
I mean, essentially that it's so true. I mean, Craig even gives this example, like, look, just track your weight and inherently.
If you have a scale, there's a study that shows if you own a scale, you're likely, and you have it like in your bathroom.
Use it every day, Craig.
No,
not
even
if you own a scale.
Even if you own a scale, you're less likely to be like you just.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you use a scale every day, I mean, obviously you'll see the micro trends. You won't wait till you're like can't fit into your pants. You'll see the 2-3 pounds there in attack.
But I like how you look. I think sometimes you can measure anything you want, and right, and let's come full circle with this pod.
Yeah.
That sometimes you can get into the minutia, and you end up being like, oh, it's too complex. Don't. But if there's a takeaway from this, it's like, hey, here's a couple things that you should do if you're not doing it now, whether you're using the software or not, because you could actually figure out some of the stuff you talked about without dental intel. It might take you a little while, but you can do it. You can harvest this data yourself. So I think a good takeaway is start with a couple. If you're doing nothing, start with a couple and just watch how it happens.
Yep.
I mean, I always proclaim to Craig that I look at like 5 on a daily basis, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Right. Once one of those gets skewed, then I dig in, because that's kind of the canary in the coal mine for me about what something may be a tell. But in general, like once you get kind of rolling, I think there's a few you can look at that kind of keep you on track.
Yep.
But you got to be doing something, and to that which is measured is improved. So I got some improvement to make to beat Craig, apparently.
Just kind of coming full circle on that mastermind too, the statistical data, it's impressive, but Peter, I wanted to mention to you, we still have a couple spots open on the mastermind. So selfish plug there. We have a handful of spots at Bulletproof mastermind.com. That's bulletproofmastermind.com. Couple spots. It's a 1-year commitment. It's awesome. It's basically 3 different masterminds in one. One of the things I love about Dental Intel is that you guys pair the statistics of how a doctor does with A and B and C hygienist and A and B and C treatment coordinator. And what I think a missing area in our dental practice industry is that we don't have, the performance together as teams, because not just some rogue high performing doctor, some rogue high performing hygienist. Where the rubber meets the road in a truly successful environment is a team approach. And that's what the mastermind is. It's a hygiene mastermind. It's a doctor mastermind and an office manager mastermind, all working separately but simultaneously on fixing the practice. That's why we're getting the results that we're getting. And it's just kind of feels like the same thing that you guys are doing with your software and your approach. So it's really a
because ultimately the lift shouldn't come from one person, i.e. the owner, right? Nothing ever happens when the doctor says, well, I'm going to fix this myself. Like you give up. But when you have the team rowing the boat with you,
like that hygiene that reappointment rate, I have no idea if you're going to say 62 or 92. I had no idea. But that's the benefit of having a team. You don't have to be the nucleus of everything that goes on in your practice. You just set the standard and get out of the way. Steve, I enjoyed our time today. That was awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Like, I mean, when you really it's awesome to get updated data. I know, actually I shared with Craig prior to coming on. I was like, man, we've had a lot of dental intel like discussions. I'm hoping for some new stuff, new intel. New. No pun intended. Hopefully I gave some good stuff. But you did it, man. It was awesome. You did, man. Awesome. Yes, you did. I want this. I'd love to have the quarterly update of the dental profession from Steve. The AI stuff of dental industry. Yeah. You will see it. So the minute you start seeing that consistent dip down, let us know. It's like we don't have to wait like the consumer, the CPI that they only report it quarterly and they're waiting. That's 2 consistent quarters. No, we could have like 4 consistent weeks or 6 consistent weeks of downturn. Let us know. Yeah, I will. For sure. All right, Steve, thanks again for your time today, buddy. And we'll see everybody next time. Thanks for having me. See you guys.